All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Brother's doing well. It's great to get back to doing some of these lives during the week. Now I got a little bit more extra time, not much, but got a big event coming up on Saturday. So I wanted to do a live today because of some of the information that's come out here in the last, really since the beginning of the new year, when a lot of the stuff drops from DWR and DNR in Maryland and DWR in Virginia. Based on all the studies and all the examinations and stuff that they had done, in the previous year, a lot of that information comes out. And it just so happens, of course, they released their top Virginia waters for trophy largemouth bass for 2024. And obviously it carries over into 2025. So there's been a lot of discussion since this came out. But I'm bringing it back up really because of what we got going on this Saturday with Virginia Bass Nation. Let's see what we got. Let me pull this up a little bit and grab this down here. Boom. Okay. So we got a Virginia Bass Nation event coming up on Saturday, March 15th. That's this Saturday. I believe it's a 7 a.m. to 3:30, I think, lines out event, kayak bass fishing event in the Bass Nation Kayak Series for Bassmaster. And for Virginia. And it's really, really great that it's back to having qualifying events instead of just one event. I think like we've had the last couple years. And so now there's basically a number of qualifying events throughout the year. You only need to fish 2 of the events in order to gain a qualification into the championship later on this year. Of which I believe 10% of the championship field gets an invitation to next year's Bassmaster Classic Kayak Series event. The Bassmaster Classic is scheduled to be in Knoxville, Tennessee, Rocket Top, 2026. So there's any number of lakes or even river that Steve with Bassmaster Kayak could pick to hold the Bassmaster Kayak Classic for the Open Series event at. But this would be one of the events that you can hop into this weekend and qualify. Get one qualifying out of the way. I know we've got a lot from our community, the Smallie Chaser River Bassin community. If you're not familiar, if this is your first time watching this on YouTube, either on my channel, JL Scott Fishing, or the Smallie Chaser channel, we are a smallmouth river-only community. But we've got some events coming up this year that are joint events, companion events, double dip event opportunities for our guys with Virginia Bass Nation. The first will be on June 7th on the Shenandoah, and then September 20th on the upper Potomac River. 2 outstanding smallmouth fisheries for this year. And we're going to cover here the top largemouth bass fisheries identified by the state, okay? And there's a caveat to that, all right? And then we're also going to talk a little bit about bronzebacks, a little bit about the top brownie, top smallmouth destinations that the state identified for smallmouth, which is kind of our jam. But we also want to support Virginia Bass Nation because, if you guys are familiar with Bass Nation and what's happened in the last few years, I've been pretty much outspoken about it. I don't apologize for that. I still think we have a ways to go with Bass Nation in terms of getting a little bit of consistency across all the states. So everybody is running their Bass Nation events the same, meaning everybody has qualifiers and championship, as opposed to just having one event at the end of the season or something like that. That really just doesn't match up with when the highest quality catch rates are in Virginia, right? You want to put people on fish at the right time. And we got coming up this Saturday, Sandy River Reservoir and Briery Creek outside of Farmville, Virginia, 2 of the top largemouth bass fisheries in Virginia for the last umpteen years. I mean, Sandy first opened up in 96. I got an opportunity to fish Sandy Creek the first month it was open back in the day. That's kind of crazy. Briery Creek, the same thing. You guys have probably seen videos that I've mentioned at Briery Creek. For me, I've mainly kind of back in the day, I did fish for more largemouth bass, mostly on the tidal Potomac, places like that, but also in the Virginia lakes and reservoirs. Both of my double-digit largemouth bass have come out of Briery Creek. Okay. Haven't had nearly as much luck as a lot of other people, but I haven't been on Sandy Creek in a while. Probably last time I was on Sandy Creek was probably 12 years ago. And probably 8 years ago for Briery Creek. Briery just holds a special place. Still got the bait, still got the hook in my hat that landed the last double digit, and holds a special place for a lot of people because it is a factory, has been. I know it's taken a little bit of a back seat, I think, for a lot of people to Sandy. I think that's a product more of kayak bass fishing than of reality, in my opinion, because I still know guys that absolutely size-wise slam bigger fish in Briery than they do Sandy. Sandy is chock full of 4 to 7 pound largemouth bass for sure. I think the surveys bear that out in terms of that have been conducted. I think the last one was conducted in 2020, and they're both in the top 5 for top Virginia waters. Okay. Over the last year, which makes perfect sense. It may surprise a lot of you to learn that neither of them are number 1. Okay. And I'm sure that'll surprise a lot of people. Another thing that's going to surprise a lot of you is in the top 5, you don't find hunting run. Okay. And that kind of like piqued my interest a bit because I don't know if that's a survey issue, an angler recognition program. So let's talk about how are they identifying these trophy largemouth bass fisheries in Virginia? Well, the only way they can really do that is twofold. One, angler surveys, okay? Meaning the angler recognition program that anglers voluntarily submit a photo of their fish and they fill out the submission and identify where their fish has come from. The problem that the community has experienced in the last few years, unfortunately, is you've got a lot of people who are unwilling to either participate in that program or unwilling to identify where they caught their fish. They're more than willing to post big pictures of their big fish, okay, like you see here posted on the screen. That's from Lake Anna, okay, I believe, or maybe Smith Mountain Lake. But people just, for whatever it is, from a cultural view or standpoint, there is a rift, okay, in the community. Personally, I do not care about you knowing where I catch fish. I do not care. I always tell people where I am, where I've gone, what baits I've used. I'm pretty much an open book because that's the culture of which I was raised in, okay? I was raised, whether it be fly fishing or fishing in rivers and wade fishing. Long before I got in a kayak, I was in a canoe and then a boat. It was always top down, old timers to young bucks, an information highway. Nobody back in the day was playing things so tight to the vest because no one, in my opinion, again, I take a lot of heat for this, but nobody was generating their quote unquote self-worth or respect based on the size bass that they caught back then, at least in the community I was raised in. Everybody it was braggadocious time, of course, but it wasn't like not wanting to talk about how you caught them, where you caught them, when you caught them. It just wasn't like that, like it is today, unfortunately. And so a lot of people don't submit their fish to this program, or they don't tell people where they caught their fish. And so that contributes a little bit. So there is a caveat to these things because they're only based on really fundamentally the angler recognition program where you manually submit your catch, okay? And you can either state where you caught it from or you could say all bodies of water, private pond, whatever. You don't really have to say, which does a disservice to the program, but okay. And then the electrofishing surveys that they do routinely in lakes to test out population density of different size fish. That's really the only two. I don't really think gill netting and things like that are a product of this. Really tend to move away from that, I think, in recent years. So it's mainly those two things. And then that's how they come up with the thing. So you may agree or disagree. I'm sure that there are going to be people who disagree with the top 5, okay? And probably rightfully so, based on a lot of the information. I personally am a tournament director for a smallmouth series. So I am more in line with where people are catching citation. That's a 20-inch citation smallmouth in Virginia, okay? So I see these fish all the time where they're coming from, okay? Obviously, I'm not seeing and judging largemouth because that's not what our series does. So I'm not as dialed in as, say, other tournament series are that fish for largemouth, right? So, as far as that goes, I still have a raised eyebrow because I know of talking to people, myself included, and then, and others fishing some of the lakes in and around the Fredericksburg area, like Hunting Run or Mott's or places like that, or Nye. They got big fish there. So it was shocking to me not to see a Hunting Run on the top 5, and to see the numbers that were actually reported goes kind of crazy. When you think about it, when we talk about the Smallie citation submissions, it really gets skewed if you look at our Tourney X for Smallie Chaser River Bassin, because we have more citations than the state has registered for smallmouth in a lot of the fisheries that we fish in and we hold tournaments on. So it's just interesting dynamic. Okay. We're trying to figure that out. We're trying to figure out how we can work with the state, how we can get them the tournament result informations, of course, with anglers' permission, to be able to contribute to these studies so they are more accurate. Okay. And I'll put up the smallmouth top 5 here in a minute. But the top 5 for largemouth bass, okay, brought to you by your DWR in Virginia. Now, what is a citation standard is 22 inches, okay, a 22-inch largemouth, okay, versus a 20-inch smallmouth, all right? And you've got to figure out that the state has determined that 22 inches is about the length of an 8-pound largemouth. So you can do it by weight, 8 pounds, with a scale, or you could do it with a board, and it's 22 inches. And that is going to be your citation criteria for what is submitted, okay? And that they are looking at when they're looking at trophy largemouth, okay? In 5th place, you have Lake Anna. Lake Anna is your 5th place for the 2024 largemouth bass citations, okay? So collected over the course of 2024, Lake Anna came in 2024. I anticipate Lake Anna to fall off this, okay? I anticipate Lake Anna to fall out of the top 5 in the next year, within 2025, 2026. I do not believe Lake Anna will be in the top 5. I think there are other reservoirs and lakes that are gaining a lot more momentum. More people are fishing them now. And I know they're catching more citation-sized fish. Hunting Run was one of them. Okay. You've got some others. I think like Flanagan and place you got Nottoway, Flanagan. They're not on this list, and they're guys catching, again, like I said, 22 and 23-inch largemouth, okay, throughout the spring. And then again, late summer into early fall. And they're just not getting reported, okay, through the program. And then the state hasn't surveyed necessarily those lakes in a while. So the data hasn't really caught up with the reality, okay? That's why you should listen to podcasts, okay? Why you should listen to local podcasts in the region that are highlighting some of these fisheries. We're going to get back to it a little bit more now that we're out of this wintertime weather, okay? And based on requests from people, I get messages all the time. I'm going to include some largemouth. I usually just do the tidal Potomac, but I am going to do the Occoquan. I am going to do, a couple other areas, for people, because a lot of people come from out of town, out of state to travel and they go and they look for podcasts that are addictive to that. And we don't really have that many really dialed in to our local lakes, reservoirs, and rivers, especially in Virginia and even Maryland. You just don't. There's not a lot of podcasts. There's not a lot of like our Put on the Map series. There's not a lot of people breaking down bodies of water. You find that a lot more down south and in Texas and up in the Northeast and places like that. Smallmouth Crush, if you're in the smallmouth, things like that. I recommend those podcasts for talking about Erie and, places like Champaign. Cayuga's not really that, but Erie, Champlain, St. Lawrence River, and then obviously the spots in Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. So your fourth place river right on the list for Saturday, Sandy Creek River Reservoir. Okay. Both Sandy Creek and Briery Creek, by the way, are located out of this great little small college town. At least I could still consider it a college town. It's built up a lot more than when I was back in college back in the day. Farmville, Virginia, which is home to Longwood College. It's an old teacher college. Now it's a university. And Hampton Sydney, which is an all-male private school. Very, very popular with the cool cats who graduate from the private schools in Richmond, Virginia. At least back in my day. Okay, so you got two. It's a college town. It's a great little town. The lakes are basically southeast and south of town. 360, 15, that kind of deal. So Sandy River comes in. Let's talk a little bit about Sandy River. Okay, I didn't really talk about Lake Anna much because honestly, I don't fish Lake Anna. So I'm not help. I just don't do it. I haven't fished Lake Anna forever. It's been a frustrating fishery. Plus all the boats, plus all the vacationers, plus all the stuff. It's just whenever I can get out there, it's like Deep Creek Lake in freaking Maryland. It's basically just pleasure boat, boom boom, wake, whatever. Plus they had a bit major issues with grass, major issues with vegetation, subaquatic, all that stuff. I'm sure it's bounced back, but it's not my jam. Okay, it doesn't have smallmouth, so I'm not your guy for Lake Anna. I just kind of know what people tell me about Lake Anna, so I'm not going to spend too much time on Lake Anna. Sandy, on the other hand, it is definitely one of the most talked about. I call it Sandy Creek, but I mean everyone else calls it Sandy River. So just me being a homer. In Prince Edward County. That's the county, by the way, Prince Edward County. And it basically got constructed in mid 90s, finally opened up, I think, officially like in 96-ish. And it's basically become a pretty acclaimed Virginia fishery for largemouth, okay? Through chat boards, through Facebook groups, through everything. And I really liken it because of the growth of kayaks, because it is a place that sets up way better than Lake Anna for kayaks. I mean, it's not a great big, ginormous like impoundment or reservoir. I mean, it's 700 and some acres, which, that's still a nice size, but it's not like a Gaston. It's not like a Bugs. It's not like, a Smith Mountain Lake, or it's not even like, an Anna. Okay. It just isn't. All right. And so I think that lends itself, with all its arms and everything, really to set up really good for kayak anglers. And we've seen that boom for kayak fishing over the last few years, right? Last decade. And that coincides with the original bass that were stocked in Sandy to now being adult largemouth. Okay. How many years does it take to get to be a 24-inch largemouth bass, right? There's the genetics involved. Depending on what time, are they F1, N1s? Are they northern strain? Depending on what the stocking patterns were. But at the end of the day, and plus forage species as well as grass, becomes big. Now, both of these fisheries, Briery, okay, and Sandy, have timber, okay? Like Briery is a flooded freaking impoundment, okay? Flooded. Farms, timber, roads, flooded. Okay, when that impoundment was created, okay, and the creeks the same, okay? It's why I call it Sandy Creek, even though it's really Sandy River. It's because it's all based on what they impounded, right? What did they do in order to create these two bodies of water in Central Virginia, right? And so you've got to look at that in terms of the history of it, okay? And what is actually down there, right? I personally believe, and I tell this to people all the time when they reach out to me, I believe Sandy sets up more as a live scope fishery than Briery does. I don't think you have to have live scope at Briery. I'm sure it'll help you, but you don't need it. I didn't have live scope back in the day when I caught 2 double digits for largemouth bass in Briery Creek. You just fish off. You just know they're either going to be in the grass or they're either going to be aligning or relating to the grass or the timber. That's it. And there's plenty of timber. So it's just a matter of breaking down the timber, right? And you've got a lot of the same similarities between the two. I think probably the one thing that stands out, I don't think there's chain. I've never caught any. I don't think that there's any chain pickerel in Briery. There is in Sandy, and they get big. They get big, boys. And so that's an issue too. You can get into those and have a bad day. I mean, a good day fishing, but a bad day if you're in a largemouth event like this Saturday coming up. So it's just interesting for Sandy in terms of this number coming into the 4 spot here in terms of trophy smallmouth. And I believe the number was 7, if I'm not mistaken, reported. Yeah, 7. Find that hard to believe. I think the caveat should be you should a good safe bet would go 2.5 times as many as the number I'm giving you. I think that would be a safe bet. So they're saying five citations were caught in Lake Anna, recorded citations in Lake Anna. It's probably 15. Okay. Right. It's probably 12 to 15. Okay. Like could be more, but I'm just saying. For Sandy, they're saying it's 7. So it's more like 18 to 20. Okay. It just is. Because I already know a few that have been caught, that aren't part of this survey. They didn't participate in the angler recognition program. Okay. So it doesn't come into play. Again, if these things aren't submitted, the state doesn't have any idea what's really, really happening. It's something they have to work on. So it's Sandy. You got that timber, you got grass, obviously you got some deeper water. Probably I'm trying to think for me, what was that place called? Is it Marrowbone? I think it's Marrowbone. The creek arm was that. It's like a creek channel near the bridge. Marrowbone was always a great place on Sandy, at least back in the day. I couldn't tell you now. But I mean that, check that out if you're looking at your navionics for the lake. I don't know what Sandy's look like. I have Briery. If anybody wants the Briery Creek navionics, just hit me up. I'll provide it for you. It's pretty good in detail. It shows the road. It shows the impoundment. It shows the roads, the depths of crazy, of what you got to deal with, more so. And like I said, full of timber. So, but yeah, drop shotting for me, like, in all this situation, not so much Anna, because Anna's so much deeper. But in a lot of these lakes that I'm going to talk about, it's really the drop shot. Like that's really probably one of the best, back in the day on Sandy, it was robo worms, shaky head, rogo, anything, any Senkos, that kind of stuff style was just always big there. A lot of people shy away. I will say this, a lot of people shy away from running crankbaits. Well, they don't shy away. They just learn real quick a valuable lesson, but they do shy away from crankbaits, lipless, and square bills at a place like Briery. Okay. More so probably than Sandy, because of all the timber that you just can't see. But now, with most people with graphs and live scope coming into play, most people see and know a little bit more about the structure. You're more and more people now you're seeing are actually catching some really good bass with some crankbaits again. But again, drop shot was always, always the key. I'll talk about a few interesting things I'm gonna pay close attention to with the event coming up on Saturday, in terms of the techniques some of the guys use, because we are in early springish, but we're really not because of all the snow and the cold. We did not have a mild winter at all, so it's going to be interesting. I know that doesn't impact lakes and reservoirs really as much with thermoclines as much as it does our rivers. But I would expect spawn to be a little bit later in the year than normal. That's just my experience when we've had weather like we've had. I do believe there was ice on both of these bodies of water this year. So that lends itself to a lot of colder water. But we are this week, we're back up into the 70s, low 70s at the height of the day. But we're also getting a little bit of rain. So it will be interesting to see the play. So the number 3 on the list is Lake Burton. Lake Burton. Okay. That to me is a new one for me. 76 acre impoundment. Think about that. Sandy is over 700 acres. Lake Burton, 76 acres. It's been around since 1950. Okay. Honestly tell you, never fished it. Okay. This one surprises me. But when you read what they've got to say, 8 citation bass were caught in Lake Burton. Okay. Last year. Let's see what it says. If it says anything else. Yeah, they're kind of attributing it to its abundant forage base of gizzard shad. That'll do it. That'll get you some big fish. Okay? And so you might want to do a little bit of research on that lake if you're interested in doing a little bit of lake fishing in Virginia, because I don't really know that much about Burton. Okay? Like, that's just one of those lakes. There's been a couple of lakes that have, like, in the last 5 years have, like, seriously, in central Virginia, have really just flourished. Nottoway, Amelia, kind of just started to tick higher with bigger fish and catch rates. Small Lake in Amelia County, Nottoway. Again, Flanagan, I think, was one. And so it's just really, really interesting to see how that all plays out. Because these lakes get mature, the ecosystems get mature, fishing pressure maybe less than maybe what it used to be. Some of these places, from what I understand. And so that's always an interesting dynamic. Okay, now we're gonna get right on to Briery, number 2, Briery Creek, number 2. So both Sandy River and Briery Creek this Saturday, Virginia Bass Nation event. You can register up until I think 8:00 Wednesday night on Tourney X. But make sure before you go to Tourney X that you go ahead and you register, pay your dues for bass. As in bass, okay, and Bass Nation. I think it's like $50 in total between the two. Get that knocked out of the way. Go ahead and register for the event on Tourney X. So you're set up, and then go ahead and fill out your liability, insurance and liability waivers and all that stuff. If you have not submitted an insurance and liability waiver yet, but you are registered for that, if you're in our community, you can go in our Discord under the Virginia Bass Nation qualifiers tab and scroll down in the thread, and you'll see links to the waivers, okay, the insurance and the waiver that you need to fill out for bass. Otherwise, you're going to be DQ'd, okay? You're not going to be able to fish. So you want to make sure. It's very simple forms. Just fill them out, send them back to Sean. Sean Barisma is your tournament director for Virginia Bass Nation. He's done an excellent job setting up this year's Bass Nation. First year for Sean. Can't thank him enough for all the work he's put in and kind of changing the game in Virginia, okay? We got some phenomenal largemouth fisheries, and we got some incredible smallmouth fisheries. And this year's schedule for Bass Nation balances both out the smallmouth guys and the largemouth guys, which I think is going to be awesome come the end of the year, because once we get to the end of the year of Virginia Bass Nation, the championship will be on the number 1 body of water for trophy largemouth bass in Virginia as of 2024, Smith Mountain Lake. Okay. So again, go where the fish are, right? Like that's the end of the day. At the end of the day, go where the fish are. So Virginia Bass Nation is going to Sandy and Briery this Saturday. Then they are going to Shenandoah for some smallmouth. You can get some largemouth too, but smallmouth destination. I think they're going to Chickahominy River, Chickahominy Lake. Okay. Some serious largemouth bass in the pads and in the grass. If you know what I'm talking about, that's tidal. The lake's not, but that's Chickahominy River. That's tidal fishing, boys. Okay. Off the James River to Chickahominy. And the Upper Potomac, September 20th, for some smallie action. So really looking forward to all events, but the smallmouth events for sure. So Smith Mountain Lake is going to be the destination of the championship for Virginia Bass Nation, and it is also, according to your DWR in Virginia, the #1 trophy largemouth bass destination with, help me out, 15, I think it was. Was it 15? No, I'm sorry. Briery Creek was 11, guys. By the way, I'm sorry. And it was 11, which means it's really like 30. Okay, just laying it out there. You guys can post in the comments. You guys can hit me up privately, but you know what I'm talking about. I know you. I know a couple of you are already in this right now that have caught freaking, 22-inch largemouth bass from Briery Creek that don't submit to the angler recognition program. So you know who you are. Okay. I mean, I'll hold your beer. Okay. It's up to you whether or not you want to submit to fish or not. I totally get it either way. But I'm just saying. So just, again, caveat. So Lake Anna was 5. Sandy was 7. Lake Burton was 8. That was, again, a surprise. Briery Creek is 11. Smith Mountain Lake is 24. 24. Okay. So times that by 3, 2.5, 60, 55 to 65, probably citations out of that lake, if you count the people that aren't submitting it. But there's another interesting thing about that, is you got a lot of people out there that I give them props because they're submitting their fish in the recognition program. Okay. And so K-Dub, that's funny. Yeah, heavy hitters, Major League Fishing, heavy hitters on Smith Mountain Lake this year. I wonder why. I'm sure they got the down low on the lake. And the fact that way more than 24 citations are being caught Smith Mountain Lake, guys. Okay, I can tell you that right now. If you're in any of the chats, any of the Facebook groups, any of the forums, Woods and Waters, any of that stuff, it's way more than 24. Okay. And so you got Major League Fishing coming for Bass Pro Tour heavy hitters. And so it's going to put it on the map. This is why I have the series, put it on the map. I know a lot of people get frustrated with me. I just try to keep it real. And I just know a lot of people sometimes I rub people some the wrong way. Because I am upfront and I will talk about it and I will put lakes on the map. I will put rivers on the map. I will show people where fish are getting caught, where I caught fish. And I know that rubs people the wrong way, but you just have to understand that's who I am. That's how I was brought up. I'm going to be gone. I want to leave stuff to people behind younger than me when I finally leave this place. And that's how I am. That's how I was raised, and working in a tackle shop and listening to the old timers every day, filling up the ice, taking care of the freaking bait fish, the live fish, all that stuff, listening to everything. It was just a different time. And a lot of people say, like, Jay, man, times have changed. Yeah, well, you know what? Sometimes the times changing thing is not positive. Okay. And if you see a lot of the stuff that's going on in the fishing community in the last couple of years, a lot of it is not positive, guys. It just isn't. And I don't remember any of that. But again, I was a kid. So, I just remember guys sitting on the back of the pickup, you know what I mean? And, cracking open a beer, sitting in the parking lot, telling stories, cleaning their coolers out, washing the truck off and their boat off, because right next to the tackle shop was a car wash. All that kind of stuff. It was just a lot of the reasons why I love fishing to this day is community, and people. You can always have a conversation with someone at the lake or at the river, man, if they get a pole in their hand. Like, you automatically know you have something in common. We're kind of missing that. So Smith Mountain Lake, 24 or like 75 or maybe even 100 because that place is loaded. But I will say this, guys, and this is the problem I think we all have, is everything is subjective. And I know a lot of people go to Bugs. Bugs has got a lot of good fish too, or Carr, depending on what you would call it. Okay? But it can be tough. Like Smith Mountain Lake can be tough, okay, depending on what time of year you're there and what's happening in the fishery. So I know plenty of people that have gotten skunked, like a lot, at Smith Mountain Lake, and especially at Bugs, or have only got like 10 pounds at Bugs. Okay, people that I know that'll put up a 22-pound bag or a 24-pound bag on the Tidal James or the Tidal Potomac. Okay, go to Bugs and put up like 8 to 10 pounds. That's just the way it is. They're there, but it's just a matter. They're hard to catch, man. And so when someone wins a tournament at Bugs, and there's some local hammers down there, and there's some local people at Smith Mountain Lake, okay, that are absolute hammers that know that lake inside and out. So sometimes you need to pay attention to when there's some of the major league BFLs. I think the Shenandoah, is it Shenandoah or Piedmont? That division, I think, fishes on Smith Mountain Lake and Bugs, one of them or either one. You watch some of them young bucks, man, who they dialed into those particular fisheries and do really well on them, the bags that they catch, because the fish are there. It's just, they can be stubborn. And I would go target smallmouth. And, obviously it's more known as a largemouth fishery than a smallmouth fishery, but there's literally a ton of smallmouth in that place. And so that's what makes the championship pretty cool that they got coming up for Virginia Bass Nation. All right, I'm gonna see if I can switch this over, and I'm gonna give you guys the if I can do it. Might not be able to do it. We're gonna switch to smallmouth, and what they said about the smallmouth was just something I'm a lot more dialed into, to be honest. And oh, here we go. All right, Smallie Trophy top waters for Virginia after last year. No surprise or some surprise. Number one, James River. No surprise, boys. No surprise at all. I know there's going to be some of you that are surprised because you're all going to think it was the New River, because the New River is freaking awesome. But the James River, the Upper James, is freaking loaded and is coming on in the last few years. And I fully expect to see tons more citations caught out of that river system in the next 2 years. Second, New River, always a staple for smallmouth. You got various sections. If you're really interested in a breakdown of that, just hit me up, because you got various sections of the New River that are just stacked with citation smallmouth. Okay, they just are. But it is an immense river system, and you got to take that with a grain of salt. You're not going to go and catch 20-inch smallmouth everywhere. You got to do a little bit of research, and you got to get dialed in. You got to be there at the right time and understand where the smallmouth are going to be through their patterns. But that is absolutely a factory for giant. Holds the state record still, I believe, for river smallies. Third, Shenandoah. Virginia Bass Nation will be there on June 7th. Our series, Smallie Chaser River Bassin, will be on the Shenandoah on the 17th of May. So if you want to come and fish with us, maybe do a little bit of pre-fishing for the June 7th Bass Nation event, you can fish with us on May 17th and dial in some areas for the big event. You can fish with us. Fourth is Murray. That may be a surprise to a lot of people. Not the chasers, but that may be a surprise to a lot of people around the state, because it is absolutely starting to come on. That fishery is loaded with bait fish. It's loaded with rock bass too as well. But it's loaded with vegetation and loaded with forage. It is a tributary of the Upper James River. It basically enters the James at Glasgow right before you get to Snowden of the Upper James, comes down from the mountains through the passes, all winding around, and it starts to head towards Lynchburg, or heads to Snowden first and then the Lynchburg. The Murray empties into the James River. phenomenal fishery. It goes all the way up basically 3 or maybe 4 or 5 miles above Lexington, Virginia. You know, so you got some Buena Vista is a good put in spot. Lexington, Virginia, right there next to VMI, where I went to college, and then you got some other things down below Buena Vista, Lochner, down in Glasgow. But yeah, I am not surprised this made the list, to be honest, because I know a lot of guys caught a lot of smallies and some citations in the Moray River last year in our series. So that one doesn't surprise me. And then Claytor Lake. Claytor Lake. Been around forever, obviously. Always just kind of in the top 10, you know, really in terms of smallmouth. There's a couple Moowow. There's a couple other spots, you know, for smallmouth for sure. You basically have most of the smallmouth west of Richmond, right? West of the I-95 corridor into the Piedmont and out in western Virginia. You do have the smallies come down the Rapidan and down the Rappahannock, okay, to about Fredericksburg to the fall line, and then below the fall line you really don't have them nearly as much. It's more largemouth. That's kind of like the dividing line in Virginia, okay, for smallmouth and largemouth, lakes and rivers, okay. The James, upper James flows all the way to the middle James, flows all the way to the fall line in Richmond, Virginia, and then basically about a half a mile after you get beyond the fall line, it's all largemouth. Like, you know, very rarely do you find any smallmouth down that way. Now, you may find some smallmouth in some of the other river systems, like the Appomattox, places like that. You know, they got some other species of fish too that are growing in popularity. But it's going to be really interesting to see how that all plays out. So for Sandy, like, I got a question. Hold on. I apologize. I forgot that I had my messages on. Baits. Yeah. I'm interested to see some of the techniques and some of the baits, because a couple of the techniques have kind of come along a little bit, you know, on strong in the last few years, like hover strolling, for example. And so it is going to be very, very interesting to see. This is the Gamakatsu Horizon Head. It's going to be very, very interesting to see, or the Smelt Head. With that timber and the things like that, or you get a bent rod fishing. Bent rod fishing's got an actual setup, a complete setup right here. So it's got your terminal, plus it's got your shad pattern soft plastics. How that plays out nowadays, because I have found that, you know, if you're worried about getting your crankbait hung up, if you're worried about your traditional jig, okay, you don't want to be flipping your jig, you don't want to be pitching a jig, you don't want to be doing any of that around, because you're worried about all that. Because trust me, man, there's tons of baits down there that have gotten people have lost, right? That the hover strolling technique might not be a bad idea. Okay, lighter, you know, in terms of that, of being able to move it in, almost weedless, in that form or another, however you want trucks to pose it. I just find you can control that a little bit better than you can a heavy jig. Especially when you're not bottom dwelling, on the fall and everything like that. So that's going to be like really, really interesting. Couple of obviously, big OSP. I don't know if you guys are like OSP, but things like that. I mean, crazy action. Look at that. Look at that action on the back of that. That's just a freaking meal right there in Virginia reservoirs and lakes. Okay. Putting that down there and present that. Again, you could present this any number of ways, guys, depending on what the weather pattern, is in Virginia. I'll either throw this on a hover rig, or I could throw it, nose hook it. I can run it like a fluke. There's so many different options you can do with that. And it's really that action that ends up enticing that strike. So again, this is a Do Live stick. It's a 3.5 from OSP. And of course, you're not going to go wrong with any of these, especially when we're talking about trophy largemouth in these lakes and reservoirs. Almost all of them are shad. Okay. And so going with paddle tail, I will tell you this, guys. I mean, it's something that I've talked to quite a few people in the last year or so. And I don't know if it's just a phenomenon or not, but for some reason, these baits with the eyes, they are getting bit a lot more than the soft plastics paddle tails, swim bait paddle tails. Okay. In the lakes and reservoirs, I don't think there's as much as a difference from what I've talked to people in the river systems, because I think you have the current and you've got everything, and everything is kind of always kind of crazy and chaotic in your river systems. But I do think that here's another BR head, by the way, different heads. These are JDMs. They're just great alternatives. If you want to throw, like, again, fish different, right? Like I said, I don't think the river systems are, a little, but I think lake and reservoirs, I think these bass have a little bit more time to key in on these baits than the river largemouth and river smallies do. I think that's been pretty much backed up by a lot of the guys that are fishing these lakes and reservoirs in terms of switching to some of these baits that do actually have the eyes, soft plastics, as opposed to not, and recognizing it. You also want to go with something. You definitely want to go with weedless stuff as much as possible. So weedless swim jig. Look at that. This thing bounces it all. So I would not be shy about throwing this where I know there may be timber, or thicker grass, because it just makes it through it based on the design and how it kicks out a little bit better. And as far as crankbaits go in your deeper water, I don't think I've shown these, because I mostly focus on smallies and our river systems, but larger crankbaits, divers that are going to mirror that shad. I don't know if you can kind of see that as good on my camera here. And then, of course, if you've got, like, some of ours in Virginia are now stocked, and they've got little bluebacks, shads, bluebacks. Some of them have gizzard shads, like I said before. But regardless, anything with that purple kind of environment, like it goes like that, you're going to be good to go on. And again, if you're going out in that deeper water, both of these lakes, coming up on Saturday, have got some deeper water. All of these do. Smith Mountain Lake, Lake Anna. I'm not real positive about Lake Burton, guys. I'll have to do a little bit more research in that for that 76-acre lake. But these other ones definitely have a lot of deep water too. And depending on what the staging is and whether they're suspended or not, depending on the weather and the water temperature and the thermocline and all that good stuff, March 15th this weekend, it really is going to dictate whether or not they've moved up shallow or not, or they're going to be out in that deeper water. And if they're out in that deeper water, it's one of those things you want to make sure, understand there's timber down there in a lot of places. But if you have that graph and you can check it out, then, that's going to give you a lot more opportunity to do a little bit of cranking, get a size lip on that. So definitely give an opportunity for that. I mean, that's definitely something that a lot of people forego on some of the Central Virginia lakes because of the fallen timber, farms, fence lines. There's a whole bunch of stuff down there. It's always interesting to see that stuff when guys take pictures of the graph when they find new stuff. Again, because that whole area was just flooded when they formed it. They didn't remove the road. They didn't remove the fence lines. They just flooded it. When they created that. But that's what we got. Okay, those are your top trophies, top waters for largemouth, top water for smallmouth in the Commonwealth of Virginia, released by DWR. And it's just great that two of them, Sandy and Briery, are fishable on Saturday for the Virginia Bass Nation event. So like I said, you can check that out on Tourney X. Hit the club tab on Tourney X, then hit Bass Nation Kayak Series, then hit Virginia, and then you'll see the first event of the season. You click on that, and it's going to provide you all of the information for the event. And like I said before, make sure you go ahead and register up with your Bass Nation membership. If you already have a membership, you've got the membership number, you're good to go. But you still need to buy a Bass Nation Virginia membership, okay? A lot of people get confused with that. But all right, if you guys ever have any questions, please put them in the comments. If you didn't join the live feed, I'll make this put on replay for tonight for everybody, and I'll share it in our community Discord and get it out also to our newsletter subscribers. Again, always here if you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, topics, or if you ever want to hop on a live and do a little Q&A, interacting. If you got something you want to promote to the community for your sponsors, more than willing to have you on. Just hit me up and give me a message. All right, guys.